hamatakiapi na mashkepi desa washdewi amachiapi na haia moslahe wichoti emataha toko ola naha niakie musake emataha. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's really wonderful to be here with you. I introduced myself to you in my mother's first language. I'm a very rudimentary second language learner of Lakota, but I used our traditional family names. My Lakota name is White Buffalo Woman, which was given to me by a grandfather in honor of my great-great-grandmother, Fanny Kilsgrove. Her Lakota name was Weston. And I also used my mother's family names, our extended families, our Kioshbaish, the Sioux family, and the Takenawai family. So from my names, you can tell that my people are people of prayer, from the White Buffalo Woman, who is a carrier of our Lakota ceremonies and our stories and our religious practice. And then from our more recent surnames that come from a very militarized time of colonization and our ancestors' interactions with the U.S. military, the U.S. Army primarily. I had many ancestors who fought to defend our homelands and our children and our ways of life at the Battle of the Greasy Grass, often known as Little Bighorn. And we have a long and complicated history and very brutal history with the U.S. military, the U.S. Army, and more recently with Big Oil, working hand in hand with the U.S. Army. So I wanted to start today with a brief clip from an amazing new film that is available online. It just premiered at Tribeca Film Festival. A friend of mine from Standing Rock, Flores Whitewell, is a really amazing warrior woman who was on the front lines at Standing Rock for the past, she lives there, she was really out in the camps for 10 months. And I've been fortunate to be able to work here in New England with a number of tribal communities. And right now I work with the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project on Cape Cod, and we just opened a language immersion school last fall. So we were really busy getting ready for this. And all of these things were happening at home. And I had the benefit of being in a very politically active and a really beautiful community that's very connected to their lands and their waters on the Cape. And so they were so supportive of me, and I was able to go home to Standing Rock 6 times in the last 10 months, to support family members and to participate in prayer and ceremony and some of the actions that were taking place. So I do have slides for you, but I just wanted to start with this very brief 3-minute clip so that you can just get a sense of the intensity of the situation and think about the aftermath of what our families are now dealing with as we move forward, and how do we continue to protect our water.
Dreaming. I'm awake. I have been woken by the spirit inside that demanded I open my eyes and see the world around me. The images are burned into my mind. The sounds of my people screaming in horror.
What are you doing? Our land is under attack! Stand up, fight back!
For us, we're connected to the earth, and that's why we protect the earth for future generations.
Our food sources, our waterways, when the environment changes, we feel it.
What's going on here at Standing Rock isn't just about Standing Rock. It's not just about stopping a pipeline. This is about the survival of humanity.
The Dakota Access Pipeline is proposed to carry billions of gallons of crude oil from North Dakota to Illinois. To do that, it has to run underneath the Missouri River, the water source for 17 million Americans. and the only source of water from the Standing Rock Nation. We call ourselves water protectors. We are here to protect the water. Thousands from all over the world came to pray with us, to face the fear with love. We are something new on the planet, but we're not. We are something very old. We are warriors of peace. We won't surrender.
I need to report an assault. There are innocent, unarmed people being attacked with water and with high-powered mace.
If there's police there, then it has...
The police are the ones attacking innocent, unarmed people. Who protects the people from the police?
Well, the next person to talk to would be the governor's office.
Love is the strongest, this path is the hardest. But if we weren't strong enough to do it, we wouldn't see it. Our prayers would not be needed, this movement's very needed. Indigenous wisdom unheeded and sacred things depleted. We are peaceful people, that's why we walk with prayer. And if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be standing here.
So if you want to know more about this part of the story, a lot of the footage that you saw was drawn from the late fall, actions in the late fall, as militarized riot police and the National Guard essentially began intervening on a daily basis. And the film is now available at the site you saw for digital download. So I really encourage people to look into that and the film guide and resources. The team is Flores and Myron Dewey, who is a drone operator who was at Standing Rock for many months, and as well as Josh Fox, who many of us know his work through Gasland and his films about fracking. And fracking is a part of the story at Standing Rock as well. So we saw the pipeline under construction, but the oil that is proposed to go under our river, under Sioux, is fracked crude oil from the Bakken region, which is north of Standing Rock, about 150 miles or so. That was an intense clip. I just need to center myself for a minute. And you know, the children that we work with here in Massachusetts, we're teaching kindergartners and first graders to speak in their indigenous language, and one of the things we teach them to do is to pray. And our incredible team of teachers also teaches them to introduce themselves. And they begin with Nuteswis, Jennifer, Natai, Standing Rock at New Tomas, Massachusetts. So we teach them to say, I am called, and they're saying New Tomas, which you could loosely translate as I am from, but it's really a much deeper meaning than that. It literally means my blood and my bones are from. And so they're expressing their connection to this land, even though at ages 3 to 6 they don't quite understand that yet, but that's what they're learning to say. And then they're also saying, you know, the place that I live, so Natai. So I said, I'm from Standing Rock. My blood and my bones are from Standing Rock. And I live here in Massachusetts, which is a Wampanoag word. It means place of the long hills. So that was a traditional Wampanoag village that is associated with what today is the Blue Hills. So, you know, I've been fortunate to be in this community where we're working with this amazing group of teachers and children, and we have the opportunity to pray together. And when I pray in my language, we begin our prayers with terms like Nunshi Makab and Tatanka, Wakantanka Tukashila, Tate Topa, and Niuchoni, which of course is water is life, or the water of life. And we acknowledge Grandmother Earth and our grandfathers, the creator, and or Whitney's son. So just needed to recenter myself here after that clip. So this is an image from one of the drone operators at Standing Rock who I believe was from Standing Rock. There was a whole host of young men and women who really brought our people's story, our community's local story to the world through social media and also through this amazing drone coverage that they were able to gather. And there was a whole host of folks here in Massachusetts and Mashpee and the students at UMass Amherst and some community teach-ins who also helped me raise funds to send 2 drones to one of the young men who was gathering footage. And we did this after, literally the day after there was an attack on water protectors who were marching with flags and posters, and dogs were set on them by the Dakota Access Pipeline security. So we just felt like this was something that we really needed to have to help protect our loved ones and our family members. So what you're looking at is a photo of the Cannonball River, and it's the Oxbow parts of it on its way to intersect with the Missouri River, which is just out of the frame to the right. And the large encampment you see on the top left is Ocheti-Shakoi, or the 7 Council Fires Camp, which was really an overflow camp that started in August. And what you see on the bottom right is the original on-the-ground resistance camp, Sacred Stone, which was started last April, so just over a year ago now. So there were 3 main encampment areas there, and as folks mentioned in the film, people came from all of the Ocheti-Shakoi, all from all of the Great Sioux Nation tribes, and from all over the world, from all over Unshimaka, to stand with us. And it's important to get situated in the Northern Plains, since we're 2,000 miles away here. So just to give you a big picture and to think a little bit about why our young people, all generations of our communities, fought so hard to oppose this pipeline, it's because of treaties that were signed, like the 1851 treaty, the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. So these are our oral traditions, they're written documents, but our families have very strong oral traditions about these treaties in our families. And North and South Dakota, the states, take their names from our people, the Lakota and the Dakota. And on early maps, this region was identified as Dakota territory. And so these original treaties were negotiated between the US Congress and our ancestors as a way to secure passage for settlers on their way to the West Coast, or for early railroad construction, and of course for resource extraction. So you can see this network of rivers that all flow into Nisose, which is the long blue line that goes all the way down from North Dakota into South Dakota. And you see some of our sister tribes, our neighboring tribes from the region, who all came to stand with us as well. And this is a graphic that's probably not super easy to see from where you're sitting, but I just wanted to show it because you can see get this here to work. You can see the Cannonball River, which is just the northern border of Standing Rock. So this is just the little tip of Standing Rock that protrudes up into North Dakota. And that is the reduced reservation boundary today from this much larger original treaty territory. And this land was never ceded, but it was reduced through acts of Congress. So we have a long and tortured relationship with the US Congress. It began with, essentially their negotiation and immediate abrogation of treaties like the 1851 treaty, closely followed upon by the US Homestead Act of 1862, which said free land for anyone who wants 160 acres and can make it productive. So because of acts of Congress like that, and because of the Battle of the Greasy Grass in 1877, what our elders have called the Seller Starve Act was implemented across the Dakotas, and our contemporary reservation borders, which were much reduced, began to take shape. And Standing Rock was further reduced in territory by an act of Congress in 1889. So that's how we arrived at this contemporary boundary. And what you see in the center of the top right there is our modern seat of government. So our tribal government is now based in Fort Yates, which obviously began as a military installation. And the modern constitutional-based government that we have today is an imposition by federal mandate by the Department of War and then the Department of Interior through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And it is a representative and elected form of government, but it is also operating in tandem with traditional treaty councils and family leaders and spiritual leaders and medicine people who continue to carry forward earlier practices of Tioshbaye governance, traditional governance for our extended families. So I wanted to show you just a sense of the vast landscape that we're talking about. This is a bust of Sitting Bull, Tapanka Iotake, one of our Hunkpapa leaders from this time of militarized conflict with the U.S. Army. And this is his burial site overlooking the Missouri River on the eastern boundary of Standing Rock, right about here. And today our communities are dispersed across this very large area. Standing Rock is about 90 miles north to south and about 100 miles wide, so it's almost the size of Connecticut. And the really just mind-boggling thing to me as we're regrouping in our families after a year and the past 6 months of very intensive confrontations with police, the really mind-boggling thing to me is that the majority of the farming and ranching operations on Standing Rock are non-Indian owned. So 80% of the 500 and some farming and ranching operations on Standing Rock are operated by non-tribal citizens. So the water that we were fighting for is directly tied to their livelihood. And so I don't know what that's about. There's some very deeply rooted challenges in race relations in the Dakotas, obviously. But the other part of this is that for people my age, people in our 40s and people who are older than me, I think a lot of us really did not honestly believe that the Army Corps would do something like this to our communities again. I think that we had a period of very intense litigation with the Army Corps from the 1950s until today. And I think that many of us believe that we had come a long way in this process of government-to-government relationships, and that they, in fact, wouldn't give a multinational oil company a permit to send 500 million barrels of oil directly under our only water source. So the reason that young people in our communities and every generation of Standing Rock rose up with such a sense of unified ferocity was because of what our grandparents experienced. So in the 1950s, the Army Corps of Engineers flooded just about 60,000 acres of Standing Rock. Along the Missouri River, they built a whole system of dams, and they essentially flooded a huge amount of the lower river timberland, people's huge gardens, all the medicinal gathering places along the river, and many hundreds of families were uprooted. So the previous slides were just some of the species that are prolific on Standing Rock today, species of deer, antelope, water birds, which are obviously there because of the tremendous fish stocks within the river. And people continue to really live through hunting and fishing on a seasonal basis. And that continued despite what happened in the 1950s when this network of dams was created on the river. And all of these areas, a lot of them on remaining tribal homelands, when those areas were flooded. So this photo in the top left is one of the earliest Western images of the Missouri River that was painted by George Catlin, who accompanied the Lewis and Clark expedition in the 1830s. So this is an image from, I think, about 1838 or so. And then this is just to give you a sense of the scope of the Missouri River Basin. And the 17 million people who rely on the Missouri River for water, most of them are a little bit further downstream from Omaha, down into St. Louis and Kansas. And this map here on the left is a traditional map of Minnesota that was made by an educator named Dakota Goodhouse. And he's used the traditional Lakota-Dakota orientation where south is at the top of our map making. So you're looking at the Cannonball River actually flowing to the east here into the river. And so what I was mentioning, the acreage that was lost, the families that were moved by the Army Corps, many of them had their homes burned so that they would not return to their homes. It took many years for these dams to be constructed and the water level rose very gradually. And as I noted, it destroyed a huge amount of gardens, community gardens, family gardens, and medicinal gathering places. So this was really, I think, at the root of why young people in our communities over the past year, they were steeped in these stories of the loss of our grandparents and how this had happened before with the Army Corps. And so it really is emblematic of why our young people were so willing to fight so hard to keep this kind of dispossession from happening again, because now we're talking about our primary water source. So this is another drone shot of the confluence of the Missouri and the Cannonball. This is some youth art from the top right showing the Black Snake, as the pipeline has been called. There's some very old stories about the prophecy about destruction of people by a black snake. And these are some of the many, on the bottom left, some of the many allies who came in the name of climate change and climate justice and a just transition to a green energy economy, because they understand that we can't continue to build pipelines that we really don't need. So the back-end oil production exploded really in the 1990s, and energy production has really fallen off lately because of the cost of it and because of the tremendously destructive process that entails hundreds of billions of gallons of water, again, drawn primarily from the Missouri River, that have to be injected into the oil fields to release the oil and the natural gas, most of which the natural gas is mostly just flared off because it's not even economically viable to collect it. So there's a double load that this kind of energy extraction is exacting on our climate and upon the local watersheds in the Dakotas. So, this is just a tiny window into some of the young women who were especially at the forefront of some of these leadership movements. The young woman in the middle here is Bobby Jean Threelegs, who was one of the youth runners who organized her peers, children who were as young as 6 to middle schoolers and high schoolers. She's in her early 20s, and they ran all the way from Standing Rock, 700 miles and some odd miles south to the Army Corps of Engineers in Nebraska to deliver a petition. The youth were really at the forefront of raising awareness about the fact that this was happening and that our tribal government seemed powerless to stop it, and that the Army Corps was really fully in support of this kind of energy infrastructure project. And there's a young woman on horseback here, who I believe is probably from the Lower Brule Sioux Reservation further south along the river. There was a tremendous youth presence in the camps, and not only from the Oceti-Sakowin tribes, but also from many of our allies all over the Western Hemisphere, and from other indigenous communities like the Sami of Norway and Denmark as well. So I'll just go really quickly through these last few slides, and just to give you a sense of what the food systems look like on Standing Rock today. It's Carson County and Sioux County are two of the 10 poorest counties in the United States. So there's a great deal of food insecurity. There's a great deal of reliance on the food distribution on Indian reservations program, which is a USDA program. And it's a lot of very starch and white flour, white grains, white rice, heavy kind of food stocks that people access on a monthly basis. But we do have a really fantastic director of our tribal food distribution program who's been with that team since the early 80s, and he's done a tremendous job of working with local and regional producers to source beef and even sometimes buffalo from farmers and ranchers on Standing Rock, some tribal, some non-tribal. And he also played a tremendous role in the camps that you saw in the early slide. He was able to deploy some of his refrigerator truck resources and really helped with feeding the mass of people who came to Standing Rock when it was really not something that was expected and could be easily planned for. But these are just photos of some of the really direct relationships that local farming and ranching operations have to the Missouri River. And it is the primary irrigation and watering source for all of the livestock on Standing Rock, which includes cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and there's also a tremendous presence of farming operations. So I think the average size of a farm on Standing Rock is about 3,800 acres, and so there's lots of sunflowers and corn and soy and oats and barley that's being grown. Some for the commodities markets, but there is also a local network of distribution as well. And our own tribe has operated a farming operation for a number of years and planted hundreds of acres of corn on an annual basis, and it's open to community members to harvest, and often our Nutrition for the Elderly program will take youth groups in the summer to harvest and then take the produce around to elders in the communities. So that was another source of sustenance for a lot of the water protectors who came to Standing Rock. They were fairly in close proximity to one of the Standing Rock Farms cornfields, and there was come fall, there were a lot of camp areas within Oceti-Sakowin and Sacred Stone that had huge bundles of corn hanging to be dried that had been grown locally. But in terms of, there's the food distribution program, and then in terms of local shopping centers, there are really 3 tiny grocery stores in this huge area. And there was a small farmers market program maybe about 8 to 10 years ago that really did not take off, again, because of the very large distances that people had to drive. There are a few community garden projects, and there are some families that still have gardens in their yards or on their land allotments. And there is really a strong tradition in a number of families of gathering practices. So there's over 300 species of plants and both food and medicinal that our elders and our ethnobotanists at the local tribal college have documented. So it's a very rich region, even despite this loss of all the bottomlands in the river. But I just listed the very few things that I've had the opportunity to gather with my family. So Sioux, which is this top right image, so that's the dried version of what you see just coming out of the ground on the bottom left. So it's a wild turnip. It's very fiber rich and has a lot of great nutritional value. And then those are some wild onions. And we spent a lot of time in the summers, helping with that kind of process, and also with picking, berry picking, things like choke cherries, and those can be dried and used throughout the rest of the seasons as well. And fishing obviously is really popular, so there's a lot of diversity in the river still, despite the growing contamination that's starting to spread through the region from the oil industry upstream. There's large and smallmouth bass, pike and perch and walleye. Catfish is really popular. There's lots of different local species of catfish. And our tribe has been as proactive as they can be, in the midst of these counties where the median income is about $20,000 a year, per capita income is about $8,000. So they have a tribal buffalo herd, we have a tribal elk herd. Our game and fish department does tremendous work every year doing counts of the wildlife population, so the elk and the antelope and the different species of deer, mule deer and white-tailed deer. So these are very, actively managed and utilized food sources for our people. And, throughout the summer, when our primary ceremonies are held, our tribal buffalo herd contributes to family sun dances. Some of my fondest memories growing up are sitting in community centers with my mom and my aunties and making, they're butchering the buffalo that's been brought in from the fields, and they're making dried meat to put up dried meat. So they're working with their knives and basically unrolling a steak like an apple peel or something that can be dried and then cooked with things like timsila and some of the other local food sources. So there is still this active practice of traditional food sources, but there is a heavy reliance on the food distribution program and very unhealthy sources of food for our children and our families. The majority of our elders suffer from diet-related illnesses. Type 2 diabetes is epidemic among our population. Everyone my age and younger in my family either has it or we're on the borderline for it. So that we do face a lot of challenges, but I think that what's come out of this last year, despite all of this hardship and this very intense conflict with a multi-billion-dollar industry, we've also seen the incredible resilience of our young people and how motivated they are to improve our communities and how much power there is in solidarity among our Indigenous communities, and how much we can accomplish together in terms of getting recognition and continuing to work to implement our treaty rights and to seek human rights and civil rights in this country, and to ensure that we will continue to have access to clean water. These are the questions that our families are asking right now. We want to know, how is water going to be stored in larger quantities in case there is some kind of spill, in case there is a leak. What kind of measures are going to be taken to step up the water quality monitoring system? Are there additional resources to do that? I don't have answers to these questions yet. I think I think many of our families, we really honestly believe that, the pipeline wasn't going to happen. And I think that's a testament to, the power of our ceremonies and the power of our prayer, that we really firmly believe that two of the poorest counties in the country could take on a multi-billion-dollar industry and win. And, what we've witnessed among our young people and their ability to lead and to, rally the world and, to cover thousands of miles. They organized a run from Standing Rock to DC, relay style. And I have a lot of hope for our future because of them and because of what they accomplished. And, it was really a tremendously emotional experience for all of our families. But I think we have a renewed awareness of just how incredibly resilient we are and how many resources we do have in our traditions and all these amazing stories that we've grown up with from our elders. And I know we'll figure out a way to continue to protect the Missouri. Our lawsuits are still winding their way through the federal courts. And our young people have really had awakened in them a calling to do everything they can to pursue green energy options and solutions locally. We live in a place that's windy every single day. And a lot of the young people who went on these runs and who were living in the camps or who were visiting the camps, they were really transformed. They had this opportunity that none of us have had in our lifetimes, where they could be in an encampment surrounded by prayer and ceremony every single day. They could wake up in that space and they could hear stories from hundreds of tribes. They could hear songs in hundreds of languages from tribal communities around the world. And so they're newly strengthened because of what they've experienced. And there's really an awakening as well around this idea of local gardening that can replace a lot of what was lost in the 1950s when our grandparents lost their massive gardens along the rivers. So there are good things that have come out of this struggle, despite the very bitter realization that this pipeline is complete and the company is projecting to put it into operation next month. So I thank all of the presenters. I've learned so much from you today, and I thank all of you for listening to me. And I have one last slide. So Lama Yayapi, thank you all, and Niwa Choni.